It's 1976, and a farmer is wrenching his John Deere to life, bare hands, no cab, diesels stinging the air. He owns 300 acres, fixes his own machines, and bets the family's future on the sky. But as land values jump, costs soar, and the world demands endless grain, survival comes down to one question. How long can independence last when everything is stacked against you? Here's what it was truly like to farm before the industry changed forever. A typical farm, in the 1970s, stretched across about 390 acres, almost always under the care of a family whose name had been on the mailbox for generations. Land in the Midwest ran between $500 and $800 an acre, a price that felt steep but still within reach for those willing to take on the risk and the debt. Most of these farms were patchwork, cornfields bordered by soybeans, maybe a patch of wheat or pasture, all stitched together by gravel lanes and fence rows. The work started before sunrise and often ran until the last hint of daylight, especially during planting and harvest. Tractors like the John Deere 4020 or International Harvester 1066 were the backbone of the operation. The older models didn't have cabs, no glass, no air conditioning, just a metal seat, a steering wheel, and the open sky. 12 to 14 hours a day, you'd feel the engine's vibration in your bones, your hands blackened by grease and dust. There was no GPS, no computer diagnostics. When something broke, as it always did, you fixed it yourself. The machine shed was your workshop, outfitted with a battered acetylene torch, a bench crowded with wrenches, and a pile of spare parts scavenged from older rigs. You learned to weld cracks in a frame, patch a radiator, or swap out a hydraulic line by watching your father or your neighbor do it first. The local dealer knew your family by name, sometimes extending credit for a part until the next harvest came in. Diesel fuel cost less than 40 cents a gallon early in the decade, but a new tractor could mean signing on for years of payments. Every repair you handled in that shed was money saved, another season bought. The land and the machines demanded everything, but they also gave a sense of control, at least for a while. Spring started, with the ground still cold beneath your boots. Planting wasn't a date on a calendar. It was a matter of kneeling in the dirt, squeezing a handful of soil, feeling if it held together just right. If you got it wrong, you risked seed rotting in the ground or a late frost wiping out your work. Corn brought $2 to $3 a bushel, soybeans maybe $5 or $6, but every dollar depended on timing and luck. Most years you'd run the cultivator several times to keep weeds down because there were no miracle seeds to do the work for you. On a dairy farm, the day began before sunrise with the first milking at 5. Cows waited in the barn, their breath steaming in the cold, and the air filled with the sharp, sweet smell of fresh milk. By the time breakfast hit the table, you'd already put in hours. Summers meant baling hay under a sun that seemed to bake the dust right into your skin, sweat running down your back as you hefted one heavy bale after another. Fall brought a kind of panic, racing storms, watching the sky for any sign of rain that could ruin a field of standing corn. When the combine broke down, neighbors showed up with wrenches and spare parts, because everyone knew tomorrow the weather might turn. Lunch came in a battered thermos, handed through the truck window by your wife, the radio muttering market prices and local news. Sundays offered a break for church, but the animals still needed feeding, and the fields never stopped calling. Every season brought its own rhythm, but the work never let up. A family farm's finances in the 1970s ran tight as baling wire. Net income for the year landed somewhere between $20,000 and $25,000, enough to keep a household of 5 afloat, but only if nothing went wrong. That number had to cover groceries, equipment payments, seed, fuel, taxes, and the dentist bill if a kid broke a tooth. Health insurance was rare. A broken leg or a bout of pneumonia could mean a second mortgage. Most families owed money on their land or their machines, sometimes both. The bank loan for a new tractor stretched over several years. The ledger showed every payment made and every dollar still owed. Every purchase was a gamble. A good harvest might mean enough left over to buy a new pickup truck, the kind with a bench seat and a radio that actually worked. A bad year, hail in June or a drought in August, could force a family to sell off 40 acres just to stay above water. Decisions weighed heavy: keep the land and risk another thin year, or let it go and hope the next season would be kinder. There was no cushion. The numbers on the balance sheet weren't just abstract figures. They were acres, memories, and futures. Every entry in that ledger was a reminder that one stroke of luck or one storm could tip a family from surviving to selling out. Every farmer wore a dozen hats, often before breakfast. One morning you might be under the hood of a tractor, wrist-deep in grease, coaxing life back into an engine older than your oldest kid. The next you'd be up before the sun, checking the sky for clouds that meant rain or wind that might flatten a field of wheat. Knowing when to plant or harvest wasn't about charts or forecasts. It was about reading the land, the way your father taught you. Squeeze a clod of earth. Watch the way the wind bends the grass. Feel the air shift before a storm. Coffee shop in town was as important as any tool in the shed. By 6 a.m., the regulars, like Bud from the next township over, were already swapping weather predictions and prices they'd heard on the radio. The grain elevator doubled as a rumor mill and a bank, with farmers calculating break-even points on the back of napkins while waiting to unload a truckload of corn. When a neighbor's combine broke down at harvest, nobody waited to be asked. You'd grab your toolbox or a spare part and head over, knowing next week it might be your turn. Wives ran the household economy with a steady hand. They kept the books, managed gardens, canned vegetables, and hauled kids to 4-H or parts to the field. Kids learned early. By 12, most could drive a tractor or help bale hay. Community meant survival. If a barn caught fire or someone fell sick, the whole township showed up. It wasn't just about surviving a bad year. It was about making sure nobody faced it alone. News of another diesel price hike hit the coffee shop before sunrise. 64 cents a gallon now, and no sign the climb would stop. Marty watched a feedlot truck thunder past the crossroads, hauling cattle for a corporate outfit that had bought up 3 old family places last spring. The talk around the grain elevator was all about land auctions, not who had the best corn stand. A neighbor's son packed up for a factory job in Des Moines, another farm kid gone. Equipment on the lot came with new gadgets and bigger price tags, but the salesman hinted that soon only the big outfits would afford the latest models. Some folks whispered you'd need 2,000 acres just to stay in the game, and the first GPS systems were already being tested out west. For families like Tom's, the feeling of control was slipping, replaced by a steady, tightening squeeze. October 1978 brought rain that wouldn't quit, turning the fields into mud and making harvest impossible. Tom stood by the kitchen window, watching water pool in the wheel ruts where his combine should have been running. A letter from the bank sat unopened on the table, but he already knew what it said. He had done the math after the last elevator run. Prices were down, the bills were up, and the interest clock never stopped. That afternoon, he walked the edge of the North 40, boots sinking in the soaked ground. and made the call that would haunt him. 40 acres, land his father had cleared by hand, would go to auction before the frost. It wasn't a choice, not really. Selling meant the farm stayed whole, at least for now. Tom was still the one making the decisions, but it felt like the end of something. In that moment, he understood he might be the last in his family to hold that power. Today, fewer than 2% of Americans farm for a living, and most work land measured in thousands of acres, not hundreds. As food systems consolidate, independence and grit that define the family farm risk fading into memory. The future of who grows our food and how remains unsettled.